Okay, let's talk about Palestinian statehood. This is something that we talk about often. This is a facet of the Israel-Hamas war that we cover on the weekly. Here's some reporting from the UN. They say, quote, statehood for the Palestinians is a right, not a reward. At the UN General Assembly, Antonio Guterres calls on world leaders to ensure the two-state solution prevails for the people of Israel, Palestine, and all of humanity. So we've been following I'll just call it the UNGA, the UN General Assembly, closely. Something that's taking place in New York, a number of world leaders attending it this week. A number of major Western nations also this week are officially recognizing a Palestinian state. Some of the countries included France, the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Portugal. Those are just some of the bigger players that are saying that they are or are soon intending to recognize a Palestinian state. This is drawing ire from Israel. In fact, this is how Benjamin Netanyahu is responding to it. He says, quote, I have a clear message to those leaders who recognize a Palestinian state after the terrible massacre of October 7th. You are giving a huge reward to terrorism, and I have another message for you. It will not happen. There will not be a Palestinian state west of the Jordan, says Netanyahu. So, where does this all go from here? What does it mean? All of this, by the way, coming as the Gaza War approaches its 2-year mark in October. I'll also mention that the United States is not one of the countries that's doing this. Host of the Strat podcast, Hal Kempfer, is here to break it all down. He's a retired Marine intelligence officer and national security analyst. Hal, the Palestinian statehood question isn't a new question. Why are these nations doing this now?
Well, they're doing it basically because the U.S. position has shifted. I mean, under President Biden, and certainly going back for literally decades, we're tacitly committed, going back to the 1990s, to a two-state solution. Now, it lost momentum towards the end of the 90s. That was when there were some big terrorist attacks by Hamas. It was actually the same time Netanyahu, first time he came into the prime minister's office. But there was a big attempt to create a two-state solution. And if you want to go back to the 1940s, 1947, 48, the United Nations actually had a two-state solution, if you will, for a Palestine and an Israel. So that's been around for a very long time. Now, what's happened is under President Trump, there appears to be no movement towards a two-state solution. It's not really clear what happens with the Palestinians after this military operation. As you've seen, Prime Minister Netanyahu has basically said, nope, won't ever happen. So what you've seen behind the scenes is Saudi Arabia and France playing a very powerful role, if you will. Saudi Arabia is a dominant player in the Middle East. France is a major player in Europe, basically moving the dial to say, well, we'll get de jure recognition, if you will, of a two-state situation, of a Palestinian state, although there is no de facto Palestinian state on the ground. What's fascinating is that you're seeing some of the U.S.'s closest allies, Canada, Britain, Australia, Portugal, all stepping in and doing the same thing prior to Macron saying that in the General Assembly today. So it's a big shift, and it's and to say there's a trend line in this direction would be a big understatement.
For these major states to recognize a Palestinian state, does this actually functionally change anything about the Palestinian territories?
That's the thing. De facto, there's nothing. There's no shift. There's nothing. In fact, it was very interesting, and I think some of this may have actually accelerated this movement. The United States, we host the United Nations. As part of that, we provide visas to various countries around the world, to include countries we really dislike strongly. We will provide visas for their countries to have representation in the United Nations. Technically, there is no Palestinian state. So this year, we kind of took an exceptional position and didn't issue visas to the Palestinian delegation to show up at the UN General Assembly, to include Mahmoud Abbas, who's the head of the Palestinian Authority. So he was there virtually today. He gave a speech virtually. He was observing the other speeches online. And so I think some of this may have been seen as something of an affront to the United Nations. As you know, we have had our differences with the Secretary General Guterres over what's happened in Gaza and in the Middle East in general. And so this is the response: is they kind of push this and kind of put it, I would say, sort of put it in our face, if you will, that all of these countries are recognizing a Palestinian state. I think their hope is that there's so much momentum that eventually the U.S. will acquiesce to at least saying that there should be some sort of two-state solution. However, our position is not different from the German position. German position is also there should be a full peace process in place. Once that is done, then we can talk about setting up a Palestinian state. But our position, the German position, aren't really that far off, which is very different than what we see with some other major countries in Europe.
So, Hal, live look at the White House, where it's 10:40 in the nation's capital. Also, our regular live vantage point of Gaza. The time, Israel Standard Time, is 5:40 in the morning. We've been watching officials react on social media. The leaders of some of these countries, including Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of the UK, saying today, to revive the hope of peace for the Palestinians and Israelis and a two-state solution, the United Kingdom formally recognizes the state of Palestine. Emmanuel Macron saying, I declare that today France recognizes the state of Palestine. Canada, Mark Carney says today Canada recognizes the state of Palestine. All of these leaders taking to social media to make it known that they're making this change. You mentioned France and Saudi Arabia, Hal, and they are important here. France and Saudi Arabia are hoping to use this year's gathering of world leaders at the UN General Assembly to basically inject new urgency into the quest for a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Hal, I guess my question for you on that front is a two-state solution the solution for the larger Israeli-Palestinian conflict? Is that usually the common train of thought with these things?
Austin, I've been looking at this for, well, 40 some years. And certainly I have seen no shift. Every time everyone digs into it, the only solution they can come up with is a two-state solution. Now, what exactly that two-state looks like, in general, everyone talks the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Now, I'm going to say just something as a general rule of thumb. If you have a country that is not, geographically connected like that, you're going to end up with some problems. And if you want to look at a big problem, this too came after World War II, was Pakistan. You had Pakistan and East Pakistan. Well, East Pakistan was Bangladesh, and Bangladesh in the 70s broke off and became a separate country. It just didn't work. I think setting up the two-state solution with Gaza and the West Bank, there'll be some inherent problems they have to work out. There's been some, kind of thinking out there, building a big causeway that would go across Israel that would connect them, and all these things are very possible. But we're a long way from there. And right now, what's happening is Israel is basically declaring that they have sovereignty over various areas of the West Bank. Further encroachment on the Palestinian villages, Palestinian-dominated areas of the West Bank. So it's putting pressure in the other direction. And certainly, if you listen to Netanyahu, his position is there won't be anything. There will be no Palestinian state. So there is really a long way to go to get Israel to go along with this. And it's definitely not where we were, say, back in the early 90s.
So this is something that we're going to have to continue to follow. You and I have had countless conversations about the idea of a day-after plan in this war. You've already alluded to this, but I hope you can expand on it. What does Benjamin Netanyahu think of a two-state solution? Where does he stand on this issue today?
Oh, he's adamantly against it. He just doesn't think there's anywhere to go. And I think some of it is he's somewhat entrenched and his thinking was already this way before, but he's very much become entrenched. And I think some of it is that there's been no way to work with the government, if you will, of Gaza. The government of Gaza is Hamas, and obviously there has been no progress working with them on anything. And so Israel's position is, look, remember October 7th, and Hamas has got to go. One of the things that frustrates them, though, is that the Palestinian authorities and others haven't really come out and fully condemned Hamas and October 7th in the way that Israel would have liked to hear them kind of basically frame that. And there's been a number of countries that haven't done that as well. Israel would like to normalize relations with all of its Arab neighbors. They would love to normalize relations with Saudi Arabia. One of the reasons that's been cited that Hamas did the big October 7th attack was they were afraid that Saudi Arabia was going to normalize relations with Israel and just forget about Hamas and forget about the Palestinian state. And so they did this big attack to put it on the table. Ironically, despite all the devastation and death and suffering, it has in fact put the Palestinian statehood issue right back on the table. That has been one of the great ironies of this war, considering how it started.